Guys, welcome to the channel. The channel is called The Layman, where we live by the credo that my wisdom consists in the knowledge that I know nothing. We're going to go into this next video assuming we know very little, because Bart Ehrman is goated at the end of the day. I mean, he's one of the most credible biblical scholars, and nobody's perfect, guys. So he is not a Christian. That was a jab. Don't do that. Don't turn it off. I love Alex O'Connor. I respect him. And furthermore, I appreciate him for not going after me for using these clips. I mean, they're the best clips on the internet. Alex O'Connor is the best, smartest, most humble, most cooperative atheist, I think, that's like on the internet right now. For such a young guy, that's saying a lot. So definitely go and subscribe to Alex O'Connor's Cosmic Skeptic if you haven't already. But look, I'm a Christian. Let's interact with this claim that Bart Ehrman makes, that Jesus never claimed to be God. See what he has to say.
I am firmly convinced that Jesus never talked about himself as God. And one way to demonstrate.
Now, the first thing I'll say, right, as a layman, and those of you who are familiar with Bart Ehrman already know what he's going to say to this. But I mean, I would say, okay, he who has seen the Father has seen me. I and the Father are one. Statements like this, there's, times where he says, before Abraham was, I am. What does that mean? Before Abraham was, I am. There are like statements like this, people kind of find, it's like, okay, how was Jesus not claiming to be God? And some people stretch verses where, like, the rich young ruler says, good teacher, what must I do to gain the kingdom of heaven? And then Jesus says, why do you call me good? There is none good but God. Well, even though that on the surface level seems like Jesus is saying, well, don't call me good, only God is good and I'm not God. What some pastors, especially kind of when I was young, they would say to me, oh, no, Jesus was challenging him. Jesus was saying, what are you saying about me? Are you saying I'm God by calling me good? I don't necessarily buy that one. Nevertheless, let's see what Bart Ehrman has to say here.
That is to line up our sources of information about Jesus chronologically. And so I mentioned earlier that we have the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. These are called the Synoptic Gospels because they agree in so many places in which stories they tell, the sequence of the stories, even word for word, verbatim agreements, that everybody pretty much agrees that there's some copying going on. Somebody's copying somebody. Scholars who've worked on this since the 19th century have said that Matthew and Luke both had Mark as one of their sources. So you had Mark as a source. Matthew and Luke copied Mark, but Matthew and Luke have a number of sayings of Jesus not found in Mark. And so most scholars today continue to think that Matthew and Luke had access to some other written source of information that they call Q. Mm-hmm. Q is a group of Jesus sayings that Matthew and Luke had access to.
It's so fascinating that no one has discovered Q. Right? Like, where is that? Didn't we find a lot of the, like the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Cave of Qumran, something like that? I'm not super fresh on my biblical, manuscript history. By the way, this guy Bart Ehrman is absolutely brilliant. I actually love where education is going right now. You see people like John Vervaeke and, Jordan Peterson. Sorry if that name triggers anybody. But, John Vervaeke out of the University of Toronto, if you go on his website, he actually gives you paid courses, and Vervaeke is a brilliant cognitive scientist. Bart Ehrman is actually doing the same thing. So if you go onto bartehrman.com, you can actually sign up for courses from, seriously, one of the best biblical scholars and textual critics that's out there. I mean, Bart Ehrman is just really one of those. So something else to think about.
Matthew has some materials not found in Mark or Luke, so they say, well, that came from some other sources, and Luke has some material not found in Mark and Luke, so that's other sources. Okay, so you got Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but you also have Q and M, Matthew special sources, and L, Luke special sources. If you look at all of that material, Matthew, Mark, Luke.
I think I missed just a little bit, guys. I'm going to go back just a tad.
You got Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but you also have Q and M, Matthew special sources, and L, Luke special sources. If you look at all of that material, Matthew, Mark, Luke, Q, M, and L, okay, all of that together, Jesus never calls himself God. All of our earliest sources. Where Jesus starts calling himself God is the Gospel of John, yes, our last source. And so, to my thinking,
yeah, what do you have to say about John, sir? because John is where he's, John is where he gets busy, sir. So talk to that, Mr. Bart Ehrman, if you're so brilliant.
You have these sources of information about Jesus. So I've just laid out six sources, 6 pieces of information versus 1. The 6 are all earlier than the 1. It seems to me completely implausible that 6 authors would describe the sayings of Jesus knowing that he called himself God and neglect to mention that part. Like that bit just isn't important enough to bring up.
Guys, this is a very relevant, and one of the things I love about Bart Ehrman is that he's a true nerd, like through and through. You can tell, and some people can tell, his personality probably hasn't changed very much since he was young. It's like I like the fact that he laughs at his own jokes. It's not a joke, but he laughs at things which should be obvious to the culture, but somehow aren't. Like our cognitive dissonance to recognize, these facts are just out there publicly to be had. And yet some of us who are Christians have kind of buried these truths in an attempt to kind of pacify ourselves against an alternative viewpoint. But I think he makes a really strong point. All of the earlier sources, Matthew and then Mark and Luke, who depend on Matthew, and then L, M, and Q, which I have yet to really investigate deeply, in none of them does Jesus call himself God. Only in John. I wonder what he's going to say about the writings of Paul, because supposedly Paul wrote prior to any of those books, and Paul refers to Jesus Christ as God, I believe. Listen, I got to brush up on this stuff. Let's continue, guys.
So I think it's completely implausible.
By the way, I should mention that you have an entire course on this very question of did Jesus claim to be God, which is available on your website. The link you can go to is bartehrman.com/godman, and that will take you to this course that you've produced on this very question, amongst a sort of wealth of other courses that you've produced. So if anybody's interested in going into more detail on this question, bartehrman.com/godman. I'll put the link in the show notes or in the YouTube description as well. People might be surprised to hear you make this claim that in all of the Synoptic Gospels, we don't get Jesus claiming to be God.
Yeah.
Is this not the case in any instance? Doesn't sort of Jesus imply that he's God at certain points?
Well, it depends how you read these passages. If you think...
What kind of passages are we talking about that people generally point to in the Synoptic Gospels?
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons you have to love Alex O'Connor, is because he's trying his best to steel man the other side, which is crucially important for a cooperative principle to be enacted. Cooperative principle, of course, is H.P. Grice, the maxim of manner, the maxim of quality, the maxim of quantity. I think there's a maxim of relevance, right? And Alex O'Connor always abides by that. So he's going to think about the other side and ask the relevant questions that the other side would ask. He's not playing favorites, even though he's an atheist, which makes him a very, very powerful thinker in my estimation.
In the earlier sources that say, well, Jesus seems to be implying he's God, because of course people will want to say that, okay, maybe Jesus wasn't walking around saying that he was God.
Yeah.
But maybe doing so wouldn't have been a particularly great strategy.
Yeah.
Maybe in order to have enough time to have his message understood by his early followers and to sort of conduct his ministry before eventually being killed, if he just immediately started claiming to be God, he'd just be killed straight away. And so what he needs to do is get the message across, get the important moral teachings, which are the sort of most important part of his ministry, and then allow future generations after he died to realize the truth.
Now, look, this is what I thought the whole time. Exactly what he just said is that's I'm going to now steal that and say, yes, that's exactly what we mean. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, that would be a plausible way to argue. I'm not convinced by it. It's what I used to argue when I was an evangelical Christian, and so I'm familiar with it. You'd have to say that the Gospel of John's wrong then, because in the Gospel of John, he does claim divinity early in the ministry.
Yikes. That's true. If you say that Jesus was actually waiting for future generations to recognize that he's God, then you have to completely nullify John. And I believe some of Paul at that point. You have to just deal with the fact that there are differences in these narratives. And then you have to deal with the fact that, Bart Ehrman makes a very relevant point, that it's like Matthew, Mark, Luke, M, Q, L, all of these early manuscripts that don't mention that Jesus was God, you're going to have to say, well, they didn't think that that was important. Well, if they didn't think that was important, why do you think it's important? I mean, so many things pop up. It's so, a tangled web we're beginning to weave, ladies and gentlemen.
And throughout the ministry. Second thing is, it'd be a mistake to say he was covering it up so that they wouldn't kill him any earlier, because he's actually not crucified for calling himself God. His divine claims have no relationship to any of the crucifixion narratives.
Now, one thing I will say is this, and correspond with me in the comments, because I'm sure there's going to be some of you who justifiably think that this is an escape route or a cop-out. But hear me out. I am a mystic. Mystics believe that it was the idea, Christian mystics, they're going to believe that it was Jesus's intention to show us that we are emergent from God, and that after death, we return to God. I mean, I think Bart would have an immediate problem with that, given Jesus's Jewishness, but Jesus did kind of break the mold on that kind of thing. What if I were to say to someone like Bart, hey, Jesus implied he was God by saying that God is spirit. Remember, he said God is spirit. What is a spirit? A spirit is a way of being. It's not a human being, it's a way of being. And the reason Jesus was God wrapped in flesh was Jesus said, I am the way, right? And I think, guys, let me consult the oracle on this, because I want to make sure that Jesus said that in the earliest Gospels, because I don't want Bart here to be able to pull a fast one on me, like, no, that's actually in the later Gospels. I want to make sure. Did Jesus in the Gospel of Mark say, I am the way, the truth, and the life, or was that in later Gospels? Let's listen to it.
That line, I am the way, the truth, and the life, actually comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 6. It's not in the Gospel of Mark at all. Mark's Gospel is the earliest.
Let's keep going, guys. Let's keep going. Bart has me. He has me in a corner. I'm not going to lie about it.
And so it's not that that's going to get him in trouble.
So, I mean, what is it? What is the?
Oh, it's pretty clear. When you read the trial narratives, Pontius Pilate kills him for claiming to be the king of the Jews. And that's a political claim. And so Pilate isn't concerned about Jewish theology. The term Messiah in most Jewish thinking at the time, and in certainly Roman understanding of Jewish thinking, is that the Messiah is the future anointed one, the King of Israel.
All right, guys. So I'm going to end this now. Let me know in the comments if you want me to continue with this particular segment. We're only 5 minutes in, but the video is longer than 5 minutes. And, now I'm massively depressed because I've had my ass kicked by Mr. O'Connor and Mr. Bart Ehrman. And, the coffee, this particular cup isn't the best. So that just, kind of puts a damper on my morning. Thank you for watching. Definitely correspond with me in the comments. Let me know what you think. If there's any way out of the corner that they are painting us in, should we just submit to the fact that, yeah, Jesus never actually claimed to be God? And what the heck does that mean for Christianity? Is it okay to take the Gospel of John and say, look, John was capturing the spirit of Jesus? John was capturing the way of being as opposed to his the literal historical Christ, which Jesus himself never even identified with. Jesus said, I am the way. So maybe we could think of Jesus in terms of a process and say that, Jesus was God in some kind of way that, Look, guys, I'm trying to save it. I'm doing a bad job. I know. I'm violating the maxim of manner. Guys, have a great day. I'm going to do another one of these.